Just a forewarning, this review will assume that the viewer has played through Far Cry 3 and is familiar with its general mechanics and style. As a huge fan of Far Cry 3, I have been looking forward to Far Cry 4's updated visuals and mechanics for quite some time. With my just under 13 hours of experience within the game, I can say with confidence that Far Cry 4 has indeed been worth the wait. Like Far Cry 3, FC4 features a beautiful, extensive landscape with an incredible amount of content waiting to be explored. Far Cry 4 is an immersive experience whose story was crafted and performed well enough to be believable in one of today's third-world countries. There are some minor mechanical flaws within the game that hold it back from being the best immersive experience that it could be, but overall the game is an absolute joy to play. This review will first cover the positives of Far Cry 4, including graphics, audio, storyline and/or gameplay, and improved mechanics. Criticisms will be covered second, including graphical demand, port issues, and mechanics. The first thing that a new player will notice upon entering the realm of Kyrat, the artificial country in which the game is based, is the graphical quality of Far Cry 4. The game's textures are definitely an improvement upon its predecessor Far Cry 3, and this level of detail adds to the overall immersion factor. Terrain looks beautiful and realistic, guns look pristine, and character models, while they could be a bit better, look good and are still an improvement from Far Cry 3. Facial animations look realistic to match their character's realistic personality, and the game features an interesting fur mechanic which is pulled off surprisingly well. However, the downside to this abundance of eye candy is that the game is very demanding in terms of computing power, which will be covered in a later section of the video. Far Cry 4 features very good audio. Gunshots sound realistic and take on the appropriate rattle when fired from a distance. One particular aspect of audio that I'm currently enjoying in Far Cry 4 is the realistic snap of bullets as they pass by your head. This is surprisingly accurate to what someone might experience in real life, and upon reflection, I'm surprised that not many games have incorporated this before. This particular aspect really adds to the overall immersion of the game and makes combat feel much more dangerous than it might have otherwise. FC4's storyline is interesting and far superior to the storyline of Far Cry 3. The dialogue and writing of characters is believable and is very close to how people might react in real life. Certain characters really sound deranged, such as Longinus, the priest gun dealer for the Golden Path, who delivers a ranting sermon every time that you undertake a mission for him. Even the host of the radio station that plays when you're driving sounds like somebody that you might hear if you turn to a humorous radio station today. Unfortunately, insofar as I have advanced through the campaign, Pagan Min, the main antagonist, hasn't appeared too frequently. This is disappointing because he seems to be a really interesting villain, much like Voss from Far Cry 3. Once again, I haven't completed the campaign yet, so hopefully he'll make more appearances. I would also like to comment on the mechanical improvements of Far Cry 4 from Far Cry 3. While individually these aspects aren't too important to the overall game, together they make a noticeable difference in gameplay. Choices within the main campaign have been introduced to Far Cry 4, which actually changes what missions you might undertake and how they affect the overall story. For certain missions, players have the choice between siding with Amita, a woman who wishes to lead the people of the Golden Path to modern-day prosperity, or with Sabal, a man who wishes to stick to tradition and who puts the people first. These two characters vie for the position of leader of the Golden Path, and your choices will directly affect who leads the people. Plants are much more rare in the wild than in Far Cry 3, meaning that finding green plants, the ingredient to craft healing syringes, is somewhat of a special occasion. Regardless of what difficulty that you might be playing at, you tend to use a lot more healing syringes than in Far Cry 3, meaning that your dependency on green plants has been increased as well. I kinda like this change because although syringes are more difficult to craft, it adds some value to plant gathering overall. Vehicles are also much more durable in Far Cry 4 than Far Cry 3, and players carry a repair tool with them regardless of what weapons the player may be carrying. This means that traveling is much easier because vehicles that you find tend to stay intact much longer. The only downside to this is that vehicles don't spawn as often as they did in Far Cry 3, which means that if you happen to lose your truck or car, you'd better hope that some random citizen appears on the nearest road to loan you their vehicle. Far Cry 4 does have some minor nuisances that can get in the way of having an ideal gaming experience. While individually these aren't a huge problem that will break the game, collectively they can become a major annoyance. The most major problem within Far Cry 4 is how demanding it is. While upgraded graphics are nice, the game takes a major rig to run smoothly at high resolutions. My GTX 770 in combination with an Intel i7-4770K can only produce around 85 frames per second at a 1600 by 900 resolution with anti-aliasing off and some settings like shadows turned down. Any rig less than a GTX 660 will have serious trouble running this game above 60 frames per second at high resolutions. In addition to being demanding on the GPU, Far Cry 4 seems to have some issues with how it uses its available processing power. The game seems to run on one core instead of distributing the load over all of the cores available, which leads to frame drops every 10 to 15 seconds. This is especially noticeable when you experience fast motion, such as driving a vehicle. It feels like there is unwarranted choppiness every few seconds that is not caused by anything new to render on screen. While not a super huge issue, it's things like this that take away from the immersion of the game. So while Far Cry 4 does have upgraded graphics from Far Cry 3, I wish that the developers would have optimized it further so that it could run as smoothly as Far Cry 3. The second major issue within Far Cry 4 is most likely a problem that developed when it was ported to PC. By default, the game has a weird sort of choppy negative mouse acceleration that really affects precise mouse movements such as aiming and targeting. This problem does not persist with controllers, which tells me that it is indeed a porting issue. There are game files that can be modified to make this problem less apparent, but it still exists to a more minor degree. Hopefully this tech issue can be resolved with a patch, otherwise without modifying the game files, aiming in Far Cry 4 is 10 times as difficult as any other first-person shooter, which makes it borderline unplayable. Besides those two major issues, Far Cry 4 has some annoyances that are straight downgrades from Far Cry 3. First, cutscenes and launch screens are not skippable. While I appreciate great writing within a game, I'm not as interested in certain character storylines as much as others. For these characters, I would appreciate it much more if I could skip through their uninteresting dialogue and move on with whatever mission that I've been assigned to do. I further wish that the Far Cry 4 launch screens were skippable as well. It's rather annoying to have to exit out of the game, whether it be to start a recording program or something else, and then have to sit through 2 to 3 minutes of title screens. I don't need to constantly be reminded that Ubisoft is the producer and publisher of the game. I already know that because I'm forced to use their mediocre Uplay software to launch the game in the first place. Overall, the options within Far Cry 4 are decent, and certain aspects such as your heads-up display are very customizable, but I wish that more options were available for audio. The only audio options are a master volume slider and the ability to toggle music on and off. I would think that in 2014, sophisticated games such as Far Cry 4 would have sliders to adjust different parts of game audio such as dialogue, music, and sound effects, but it appears that this is not the case. I'm not a fan of how the skill system is set up in Far Cry 4. Previously in Far Cry 3, the only thing holding you back from purchasing a particular skill would be either to purchase the prerequisite skill for it, or to complete more campaign missions. In Far Cry 4, you must complete certain types of quests in addition to purchasing the prerequisite skill for the skill that you wish to purchase. For example, to purchase the skill that allows for infinite sprinting, I need to first purchase the skills before it, and complete the additional prerequisite of reaching Karma level 4, which involves hours of looking for Karma events to complete. It really makes achieving skills a grind since I don't necessarily enjoy the different types of missions that I am forced to complete. Outposts have been made slightly harder to take down because manually disabling an alarm no longer shuts down all of the alarms in the outpost, just the individual alarm that you're staring at. I don't like this change because it removes the reward for sneaking past all of the baddies within the outpost. I might as well shoot all of the alarms with a silenced weapon and then open up instead of attempting stealth and sneaking my way around. I still don't like how bodies aren't auto-looted when you walk over them. This may just be me being lazy, but this is 2014. We still have to spend 5 minutes crouching down and looting bodies by holding buttons after every major gunfight. Just make the looting system automatic, or at least like the Elder Scrolls system where you press a button to look at the body's inventory and then press another button to take all of the items. Finally, the last bone I have to pick with Far Cry 4 is the fact that a lot of cutscenes happen in 30 frames per second. If I'm used to running around in the jungle shooting bad guys at 85 frames per second, why would I ever want my cutscenes reduced to a mediocre 30 FPS? It makes no sense. Overall, I would say that Far Cry 4 is a slight improvement upon its predecessor Far Cry 3. It's definitely a good game as it is with its captivating environment, realistic dialogue, and interesting story, but a lot of its graphical and mechanical issues would have to be fixed before it could stand head and shoulders above Far Cry 3. That's it for today's review, guys. As always, if you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a rating. I always appreciate it. And feel free to subscribe if you enjoy my content. And I'll see you guys later.